I'm Megan. Welcome to this virtual space that's being curated for our reciprocal fulfillment and flourishing. Our vision at Larksong is to courageously create a more fulfilled and flourishing world. So periodically I like to use this platform to share information that I believe is meaningful so that we can increase our well-being together. Today I'd like to talk about reparenting ourselves. And in order to do that, I'd like for us to get grounded into our bodies through our breath. And then we'll talk about attachment and endogenous opioids, reparenting ourselves, and we'll finish up with a self-compassion break together. So we're going to do some repetitive breath work called 4-7-8. This is sometimes called magic breathing. It's a great breath for pain relief or and calming our nervous systems, refocusing them as well. So what we'll do is inhale through our nose for a count of 4, hold our breath for a count of 7, and then exhale forcefully through our mouth for a count of 8. I will lead us through the count the first time, and then I'll breathe with you the second 2 times. Okay, so inhaling, 3, 2, 1, hold, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, exhaling, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Again. Again. Great. So we'll start off by talking about attachment. Attachment theory was first explored by the theorist John Bowlby and then later expanded on in the 1970s by Mary Ainsworth. It's been further expanded upon and synthesized and integrated by many other social scientists, psychologists, scholars, and practitioners after her too. If we were to take attachment theory and kind of boil it down to its basic essentials, we're asking a question of the person that's being cared for, of the person that is attaching themselves to a caregiver. We're essentially asking, is the caregiver accessible to me, responsive to me, and attentive to me? If the answer is yes, then we develop an understanding that we're loved, a confidence in our sense of self, and we feel a sense of security in the world around us. We experience sensations of relief and reward, and this is called secure attachment. But if we ask the question, is the caregiver accessible to me, responsive to me, and attentive to me, and the answer is no to any of those things, then we develop an understanding that love toward us is deserved or earned based on something other than our own inherent worthiness to be loved. We also, our sense of self becomes fragmented so that the parts of us that seem to take care of us best show up the most. For example, if being loud and seen seems to take care of me best, then those are the parts that'll show up the most. But if being withdrawn and quiet and calm seems to take care of me best, then that'll be the part that shows up the most. We also feel disconnected and insecure in the world around us. So we experience sensations like pain and a threat to our sense of safety, both within our bodies and outside of ourselves. This is called insecure attachment and can manifest in 3 different classifications: anxious ambivalent attachment, avoidant attachment, or disorganized attachment. These secure or insecure attachment styles impact all of our relationships moving forward throughout the rest of our lives. It impacts our relationship with ourselves, our relationship with our family of origin, our partners, others, even our relationship with God or the divine. Some of the ways that this shows up in adult relationships that you might see in yourself or in others is maybe being extremely worried about social bonds breaking. Someone breaking up with you or not showing up or not being what they said they would be for you. And that would be indicative of an anxious, ambivalent attachment style as an adult. Or perhaps you feel really uncomfortable depending on other people, asking them for help and relying on them. And that would show up as avoidant attachment style in an adult. Okay, so we've got these basics of attachment theory, and now we're going to talk about endogenous opioids. You have probably heard of lots of different synthetic opioids like heroin, morphine, codeine, those sorts of things. And understanding endogenous opioids will help us understand how we respond to pain, but also can help us understand why we're drawn to certain synthetic opioids as well. Endogenous opioids are a classification of neurotransmitters that provide natural and innate pain relief. The endogenous opioid system is scattered throughout our bodies in both our central nervous system, which is our brain and spinal cord, as well as our peripheral nervous system, the rest of the nerves that come out of our spinal cord. Endogenous just means that they have an internal cause or origin. Basically, these are the natural opioids that our bodies are equipped with. These natural occurring opioids are actively engaged in many things, one of which is how our bodies and conscious minds process pain, and another is modulating our mood and sense of well-being. These endogenous opioids you've probably heard referred to as endorphins, those natural chemicals that get kicked up in our bodies when we're exercising, when we're experiencing joy, when we're achieving goals that we've set our mind to, those sorts of things. So there are many other things as well, but the two things that we'd like to focus on for today's purposes are how endogenous opioids process pain and how they modulate our mood and sense of well-being. So when we experience a painful event, many things happen in our nervous systems, and one of those things is a release of endogenous opioids to manage, modulate, and relieve that pain. And when I say modulate, I mean send signals back and forth about the pain that we need to pay attention to. Not all pain that's experienced, not all painful stimuli that's experienced by our bodies is then processed in our conscious awareness. So you could have a lot of pain happening or being stimulated without becoming aware of it because your executive functioning in your brain is paying attention to something else. This kind of release of endogenous opioids is true for physically painful stimuli as well as emotionally and psychologically painful stimuli. So they play a critical role in modulating our response to social rejection and social acceptance as well as psychological distress. Okay, so what does that have to do with anything? Well, if we take what we know about attachment and we add what we know about endogenous opioids, we put those two things together, then we can talk about reparenting and how to do that effectively for ourselves. When we're experiencing positive social connection with our caregivers as children, our caregivers are accessible, attentive, and responsive. And when that happens, our neural pathways are developing in an adaptive and healthy way that increases our well-being across our entire lifetime. If we experience negative social interaction with our caregivers as children, which many, if not all people do at some point, caregivers that maybe are not accessible, not attentive, not responsive, our neural pathways then develop in a more maladaptive way that heavily relies on our pain relieving endogenous opioids for our preservation and survival. If we all experience these positive and negative interactions. But if the negative interactions become recurring and traumatic, then we actually develop a habituated response to pain in which we create more pain for ourselves so that we can release more opioids. This can manifest itself as excessive and addictive behaviors, usually related to our appetites, things like food, drink, sex, etc., substance dependence, and even relational and self-sabotage. One way to understand what's happening and some of the things that are occurring in you in times of distress is by understanding these endogenous opioids, especially if you've endured recurring childhood, collective, or systemic traumas that have threatened your sense of self and safety. So, okay, many of us have experienced that. So then do we just say, well, now I'm damaged and the damage was done to me by other people or during my childhood, and I'm caught up in this habitual pain response where I create more drama in my life than is necessary. I react to pain with harm when that's not necessary. But it's all that I know to do because it's all that I've done before, and somehow it seems to work for me to relieve my pain, at least temporarily. The thing is, we're adults now, right? And so there are a lot of people acting in very childish ways when they experience pain and when they experience trauma and when they experience heartache. And that makes sense if they still are not attentive, accessible, and responsive to themselves. So a beautiful and a difficult thing about being an adult is that we have to take personal responsibility for ourselves, regardless of what has been done to us or what has happened to us. The beautiful thing about that is that we can reparent ourselves by becoming accessible, attentive, and responsive to ourselves. And the difficult thing is also that we need to be responsible for becoming accessible, attentive, and responsive to ourselves, like constantly, all the time. We have to be accessible to ourselves through rest and renewing practices, even when it's inconvenient. We have to become attentive to our thoughts, our emotions, our words, our energy, our belief, and our actions, even when they are uncomfortable and things that we used to think were true now show up as untrue. And we have to be responsive to our needs. This sometimes looks like removing ourselves from people, spaces, and routines that violently or habitually reject those needs being met. It also might look like adding things into your routine that seem luxurious at first to meet your own needs. So, how will we choose to reparent ourselves today? What are maybe some things that you can do to remind yourself that you're worthy of love just because you are here? That the wholeness of yourself can seek security and invitation first in your own body and your home, and then beyond. And that feeling a sense of security and belonging as you move through the world is essential for your survival and for your flourishing. Maybe you already know, but I also have some suggestions. Here are some practices that activate endogenous opioid release that aren't rooted in reactive pain relief and that soothe your nervous system by toning your vagus nerve. Social laughter. So if you can find a way, a space, a time to laugh with friends and family, that makes a huge difference. Deep breathing, meditation and prayer, exercise, tapping, cold exposure. This can happen by splashing cold water on your face, taking a cold shower, or going for a walk in the cold. Just make sure you keep breathing. Making music or singing, dance parties, double points for the dance parties if you can do it socially with someone else, even virtually. Gratitude visits. Gratitude visits are a practice of reflecting on whom in your life you may not have been able to adequately express thanks to for their investment in you. So you write a letter of gratitude to them, set up a 30-minute meeting with them, and then you read and deliver that letter to them at the visit. Havening techniques or supportive touch, and practicing self-compassion. If all or any of these practices seem new to you, some additional things that you might want to search or Google are polyvagal theory, vagal toning, VAGAL, emotional freedom techniques. And with emotional freedom techniques, you can find lots of different resources online. You can start practicing that tapping, emotional freedom techniques on your own at any time without advanced training. Havening techniques. There are lots of options for people to lead you through different havening techniques. This is gentle stroking of your arms, your face, possibly even your hands. It reminds your peripheral nervous system that you're at home and safe within yourself. Dr. Kristen Neff and self-compassion. Some additional things to possibly search would be interpersonal neurobiology and positive neuroplasticity. While it would be great if I could just give you this list of things to do and these list of items to search, and we could all be okay on our own, that's not really how it works. Sometimes this is incredibly difficult to do on your own because as a human, our bodies, our minds, our hearts, spirits, and souls were not designed to function in isolation or social withdrawal. This is why you might consider becoming part of a support group or maybe furthering your education in an area of passion or interest, or hiring a licensed therapist or a professionally certified coach to connect with you and move through these challenges and obstacles with you. To end, I'd like to lead us in a self-compassion break. This practice was developed by Kristen Neff and can be found on her website as well. So before we go on our way today, find a place on your body that's receptive to and comforted by your touch. For me, that's often my heart and solar plexus. For you, it might be your heart, your neck, a hug, your hands, maybe even your face. And take a deep breath. With this breath, we want to mindfully acknowledge that this is a moment of pain, heartache, and exhaustion. And it might be something else for you. So whatever this is a moment of for you, acknowledge that moment within yourself now. And next, we'll acknowledge our common humanity by saying something like, I am not alone. While I may have never experienced these circumstances, I have experienced these emotions, this pain, this heartache, this exhaustion, or whatever this moment is for you. And so have so many others around me. And finally, we'll end our break with a blessing or an act of self-kindness. So here's the blessing that I've crafted for us today. May my pain be transformed, and may loving restoration make its home in me. May your pain be transformed, and may loving restoration make its home in you. And may our pain be transformed, and may loving restoration make its home in us.